I spent $216,000 on my parents' medical bills over the last decade. The day I lost my job, my mom's only response was, "Find a new one faster. Dad's meds are due Thursday." If you've ever felt like the reliable sibling who gets taken for granted while everyone else plays house, this story is exactly why you need to start setting boundaries today. My name is Sarah Miller, and I'm 43 years old. For a solid decade, I shelled out $1,800 every single month to cover my parents' mounting medical overhead. Then, the literal day I got canned from my job, my mom just looked at me and said, "Better land a new gig pronto this time around." She didn't even bother to check if I was holding up or if I had a backup plan. She just asked about Thursday's pharmacy refills, so right then and there, I quit cutting those checks. 1 month later, at our big Easter family cookout, I dropped 10 years of bank records right on the table in front of the whole crew. My mother knew exactly what was in that manila folder before I even flipped it open. Before we dive into the fallout, please take a second to hit that like and subscribe button, and let me know in the comments where you're tuning in from and what time it is for you right now. I love seeing how far these stories travel. Now, let me take you back 12 years to that brutal winter when my dad's knees finally gave out for good. Every month on the final Saturday, I'd sit at my kitchen island after my daughter Chloe went to bed. The house was dead quiet, just the fridge humming in the corner and the stove clock ticking past 11:00 p.m. I'd grab my checkbook, write out the amount $1,800, tear it off along the perforation, slide it into a plain white envelope, lick the seal, and press it shut. The adhesive always tasted like bitter cardboard and chalk. After 10 years of that ritual, I could do it in my sleep with one hand tied behind my back. It all kicked off in the winter of 2014. My dad, Bill, was 61 then and still pulling wire for a living as a master electrician. We're talking 40 years of dragging himself through dusty attics and cramped, damp crawl spaces. Then one morning, his right knee just quit on him. The left one blew out 3 months later. It was double replacement surgery. Medicare covered the actual operations, thank God. But the rehab, the supplemental premiums, the pharmacy copays, and the endless follow-ups, those expenses fell into a hole so big you could lose a whole family's future in it. Dad was out of work permanently. Mom hadn't had a paycheck of her own since 1982. Their Social Security barely covered the mortgage and the grocery bill on a good month. The extra insurance alone was over $700 a month for the pair of them, and that's before you even get to the Part D costs and the dental or vision stuff that Medicare won't touch. I was 33 at the time, just promoted to senior auditor at a local firm in town. I told myself it was just a stopgap, just a temporary lift until Dad got back on his feet. I said that in January. By June, I stopped saying it out loud. By the next January, I stopped even thinking it. The check became a reflex like the water bill or the electric, except the utility company actually sends a thank you or a rewards points notice occasionally. Mom never thanked me, she just verified. Every month, like clockwork, the phone would ring. "Sarah, did you drop it in the mail yet? The drugstore called about your father's blood thinners." That was her version of a receipt. "No, I appreciate it," just a status update. I tried once during that second year to ask if my brother Jason could pitch in. Jason was 40 at the time. He was in regional sales, making a fat salary, driving a company SUV, and living in a house with a 3-car garage. Mom shut me down before I could even finish the sentence. "Your brother has his own household to provide for, Sarah. Don't start." So I didn't start. I didn't start for a decade. I just sat at that island, licked those envelopes, and watched the clock hit 11:47, then midnight, then later. The thing about lugging a burden for years is that you forget what it actually feels like to walk upright. You get used to the hunch. Let me tell you about Thanksgiving 2 years before the wheels came off. That dinner explains everything. Jason drove in from his gated community 40 minutes away. He brought an expensive Napa Red and his whole family, his wife, Becky, and their 2 boys. He walked in and Mom lit up like a Christmas tree. "Jason, oh, you look so successful. Becky, doesn't he look great?" She straightened his collar like he was a prince. She bragged about his promotion to anyone who would listen. She told the neighbors her son was basically running the whole East Coast wing of his company now. I drove in from 10 minutes away. I brought a homemade casserole I'd been prepping since 5 a.m., a bag of Hawaiian rolls, and that month's envelope hidden in my bag. Mom opened the door, glanced past me at my dish, and said, "You used the oversized pan again. I hope there's room in the oven." Chloe helped me unload the car. She was 13 then, already taller than me, watching everything with those sharp, quiet eyes that see way more than you think. After dinner, I was stuck at the sink scrubbing dishes for 15 place settings. Everyone else was in the den watching the game. I could hear Mom telling Jason's boys a story about when Jason hit a home run in Little League 30 years ago. The steam from the hot water fogged my glasses, and I had to keep drying them on my shirt. I tried to be brave. I dried my hands, walked into the den, and said, "Mom, I wanted to talk about the medical bills. Maybe we could look at splitting things up." "Not now, Sarah. It's Thanksgiving." Jason looked up from his iPad for a split second. "What medical bills?" Mom answered before I could. "Nothing, honey. Sarah's just stressed and tired." She patted the sofa. "Come sit here, Jason. Tell us about the new territory you're managing." Later that night, while I loaded my own dishwasher at home, Chloe sat on the counter eating a leftover slice of pie. "Mom," she said, "Grandma acts like Uncle Jason invented the wheel." I laughed because it was spot on. I also didn't correct her because she wasn't wrong. Jason carved the turkey and got the applause. I paid the freight and got the sink. We each had our roles. The difference was that everyone cheered for the carving. I found out later that Becky had pulled Jason aside that night and said, "Don't make it weird. Sarah just gets touchy about money because she's an accountant. I'm an auditor. I literally count things for a living. So you'd think I would have done the math on my own life sooner, but sometimes the numbers you run from the hardest are your own." It was a Wednesday night about 6 months before I lost my job. Chloe was at a sleepover. The kitchen was dark except for the glow of my MacBook. That cold blue light makes everything look a little bleak. I opened a spreadsheet I'd been updating since year 1. Just a habit, nothing more. Column A, date. Column B, amount. Column C, the coverage, supplemental premium. Part D, bills copay for the orthopedist. Mom's dental work. Dad's blood thinner refills. Mom's new bifocals. On, row after row, month after month, year after year. I scrolled to the bottom and let the sum function do its thing. $216,000. I just stared at the screen. The cursor blinked next to the total like it was waiting for me to scream or cry. I didn't give it the satisfaction, not yet. I just did what auditors do. I compared it to other data sets. A down payment on a house in a nice neighborhood, about $180,000. $4 years at a top-tier state college for Chloe, roughly $120,000. A brand new car every single year for 2 decades. Then I thought about Chloe's 529 college fund. I'd started it when she was a baby with such high hopes. Auto deposits, compound interest, all the responsible parent math I preached to my clients. But 3 years back, when Dad needed his second surgery and the out-of-pocket hit $12K in one season, I dipped into that fund. I told myself it was a loan I'd pay back. I hadn't. The 529 balance was in another tab. I clicked it. $6,200. It should have been $18,000 by now. The difference was sitting in my parents' medicine cabinet. I shut the laptop. The screen went black and the room went black with it. I sat in the dark for a while, just the fridge and the clock. The same 2 sounds that had been my only company every envelope night for a decade. I didn't tell a soul about that number. Not yet. But I stopped viewing the payments as a gift to my parents. I started seeing them as a debt I was forcing my daughter to pay for people who didn't even see me. That's a completely different kind of math. March 11th was a Tuesday. I remember because I had a dentist trip for Chloe on Wednesday that I'd already bumped twice. And I was wondering if I could slip out of the office early for the 3:15 slot. I didn't need to worry about leaving early. At 10:14 a.m., my boss walked into my cube with a woman from HR I'd never seen. They had the look, the tight, practiced smile, the manila folder, the rehearsed sympathy. Restructuring. The accounting wing was being outsourced. My role was gone. 14 years of my life, 20 minutes of talking, 1 cardboard box. I carried it to my car in the pouring rain. The box got soggy on one side, the bottom started sagging, and I had to cradle it from underneath so my life wouldn't fall through the cracks in the parking lot. A mug Chloe made in 6th grade. A photo of her 8th grade graduation. A desk plant I hadn't watered in weeks. That was 14 years of my career, and it all fit in a box that couldn't handle a light drizzle. I sat in the driver's seat, engine off, rain drumming on the roof. The box smelled like damp paper and stale coffee grounds. I called my mother. I didn't want cash. I didn't even want a lead on a job. I just wanted her to say, "Oh, honey," the way some moms do. The way I'd say it to Chloe, just those 2 words. Mom picked up on the 3rd ring. "Sarah, I'm right in the middle of my show." "Mom, I got laid off today." 3 seconds of dead air. I counted them. "Well, get another one faster this time. Dad's meds are due on Thursday." She didn't ask what happened. She didn't ask if I had a cushion. She didn't ask about Chloe. She asked about Thursday. I sat in that lot for another 20 minutes. The rain kept coming. I didn't even turn on the wipers. And somewhere between minute 8 and 15, the guilt just evaporated. I drove home. I made dinner. I helped Chloe with her geometry. And when Saturday rolled around, I sat at my kitchen island at the usual time, pulled out my checkbook, and put it right back in the drawer. The envelope stayed empty for the first time in 120 months. 2 weeks is all it takes for the machine to notice you've stopped feeding it. The first letter hit my parents' house on a Monday. A polite notice from the insurance carrier, cream-colored paper, official logo, letting Mr. and Mrs. Miller know their premium was 14 days late. "Please pay promptly to avoid losing coverage." My phone blew up at 6:40 that night. I was dicing onions for a soup we were going to eat for 3 days. I saw Mom's name and let it go to voicemail. Then it rang again. Then a 3rd time, I put the knife down. "There's a letter from the insurance company." "No, hello. No, how are you? Just what did you do?" "I didn't do anything, Mom. That's the point." Silence. "Then your father needs his meds, Sarah. You know what happens if he skips. If something happens to him, that's on you." I leaned against the counter. My hands smelled like onions and my eyes were stinging, so I let them leak without deciding if it was the vegetables or the venom. "Mom, I lost my job. I told you that. And I told you to find a new one. People get hired every day." "I'm trying, Mom, but I can't pay $1,800 I don't have." "Then borrow it. Ask the bank. You always figure it out, Sarah. That's what you do." That's what you do. 4 words that sound like a compliment if you aren't paying attention. What she meant was, that's your job description. Figuring things out was my assigned lane. Just like Jason's lane was showing up with wine and getting a standing ovation, and my sister Brenda's lane was living 1,000 miles away so nobody asked her for a dime. I told her I had to go. She told me to think about what I was doing. I hung up and finished the onions. That night, after Chloe was tucked in, I sat in the kitchen and listened to the silence where the phone should have been ringing. Mom was already calling Jason. I knew because Chloe had been at my parents' place that afternoon and saw Jason's name on the caller ID. The machine had noticed, and now it was hunting for a new source of fuel. Aunt Vive's house always smelled like chamomile and old books. She had these beeswax candles on every sill, said they cleared the air, but I think she just liked the golden glow. Small and gold against the lace curtains she'd had since the 90s. I showed up on her porch Saturday morning without a heads-up. She opened the door in her gardening gear, saw my face, and said, "I'll put the kettle on." Vive was Dad's younger sister, 68, a retired teacher, never married, no kids, and sharp as a razor. She was the kind of woman who used one sentence when 10 would do, and that sentence usually hit you like a freight train right between the eyes. She poured the tea and just waited. Vive was a pro at waiting. She handled middle schoolers for 34 years. She could outstare a glacier. I spilled everything. The checks, the $216K, Chloe's empty fund, the layoff, the cold phone call, the empty envelope. I talked for 20 minutes straight and she didn't budge. She just sipped her tea, watching me over her glasses. When I finished, she set the cup down and said 5 words that nearly floored me. "I've been waiting 10 years. "What do you mean? For you to stop? I've been waiting a decade for you to stop, honey." She told me she'd known since year 2. Dad had slipped up at a family lunch when Mom was in the bathroom, just a comment like, "Sarah's been a real lifesaver with the bills." Vive did the math and hated the result. She tried to tell Mom once about 5 years in. Mom iced her out. Didn't speak to Vive for 2 whole years. Told the family they'd had a disagreement without saying why. "Your mother told everyone I was the difficult one," Vive said. "I let her because I figured you'd find your limit eventually, and here you are." I gripped my mug, letting the heat sink into my palms. "I don't know what I'm going to do yet." Vive looked at me the way a teacher looks at a kid who already knows the answer. Whatever you decide, I'll be at that table with you. I didn't know which table she meant yet, but I would soon. I want to pause here for a second. If you've ever been the fixer in your family, the one who handles the bills, the crises, the heavy lifting, and the emotional labor while nobody ever says thanks, I see you. I really do. It's a lonely place to be. Drop a comment and tell me, have you ever had to draw a line with someone you love, even if it felt like it would blow everything up? And if this story is hitting home, please hit like and subscribe so you don't miss what went down at that Easter table, because it's coming and it gets intense. Now back to it. Jason called on a Thursday night. I was on the sofa with Chloe, half watching some cooking competition neither of us liked. His name popped up and my stomach did a knot like bracing for a car to run a red light. Trish, what's the deal with Mom and Dad's insurance? I could hear his TV in the background, ESPN or something, the crowd roaring. He sounded comfortable, feet up, probably had a cold beer open. I lost my job, Jason. I told Mom 2 weeks ago. Yeah, she mentioned that, but she says you just quit paying, just stopped. How much do you think I've been paying? A pause. I heard him shift in his leather recliner. I don't know, a couple hundred, whatever the gap is. $1,800 a month for 10 years. The game on his TV filled the silence for a long time. I let it. That can't be right, he said, but his voice had shifted, thinner. The swagger was gone. $216,000, Jason. I have the spreadsheet. I have every bank statement. Another silence. Then, why didn't you say anything? I tried, Thanksgiving, you were busy with the game. Mom said I was just tired. I heard him sigh, a long, heavy exhale. The sound people make when they're faced with a bill they didn't see coming. I pictured Becky in the other room, the big house, the new SUV, the life that had never once been interrupted by a Saturday night envelope. Let me talk to Mom, he said. I'm sure we can figure something out. That phrase, let me talk to Mom, was Jason's signature move. It meant I'm going to pass this off to someone else and call it leadership. He'd been doing it since we were kids. Broken window, let me talk to Mom. Failing grade, let me talk to Mom. Sister quietly drowning in debt for a decade, let me talk to Mom. I said, okay. I said, good night. I hung up and looked back at the TV. Chloe looked at me sideways, her eyes knowing exactly what just happened. He's just gonna let Grandma handle the heavy lifting, isn't he? Chloe said, not even looking up from her phone. 15 years old and she already had the family playbook memorized. Jason called back 2 days later. I knew before he even opened his mouth that his wife, Becky, had gotten to him first. His voice had that stiff, rehearsed quality, the sound of a man reading a script someone else wrote, trying to pass the lines off as his own. Sarah, I talked to Mom. She's really hurt, he started. She thinks you're doing this out of spite. Like you're bitter about the layoff, and you're taking it out on her and Dad. I closed my eyes. Of course. Mom hadn't told Jason the truth, that her daughter was broke and couldn't bankroll their lifestyle anymore. She'd spun a narrative. In Mom's version of the story, I wasn't a woman who'd run out of money. I was a woman who'd run out of loyalty. That's not what's happening, Jason, I said firmly. She was crying, Sarah. I'm sure she was. She's good at that. Man, that's cold, he muttered. No, Jason. Cold is being told to land a new gig faster the day you get escorted out of your office. Cold is 10 years of checks and not a single thank you in the memo line. He didn't have a comeback for that. Instead, he reached for his go-to move, a temporary fix. Look, I'll Venmo Mom a little something to bridge the gap for now, but once you land on your feet, you need to step back up. This is your thing. You're the one who set this system up. That little something turned out to be a one-time payment of $200. I know because Mom mentioned it the next week in a voicemail I didn't return. She mentioned it the way you mentioned someone holding the door open for you at the mall. A nice gesture, but not a solution. What really stuck with me, though, wasn't the measly amount. It was something I'd heard in the background of that call with Jason, Becky's voice. I couldn't make out the words, but I knew the cadence. That rise and fall of someone giving directions. She was sitting right there beside him, feeding him his lines, and he didn't even realize he was being a ventriloquist's dummy. Or maybe he did, and it was just easier to play along. $200. After 10 years of $1,800 a month. I sat at the kitchen island that night and did the math, because that's what I do. Jason's big contribution represented exactly 0.09% of what I'd paid over the last decade. I wrote that decimal on a sticky note and slapped it on the fridge right next to Chloe's honor roll certificate. Some numbers deserve to be on display. The second month hit like a door slamming in our faces. My parents' doctor called their house to inform them that Dad's follow-up, the one he'd been waiting 6 weeks for, was canceled. They wouldn't see him until the outstanding copay balance from the last visit was settled. The debt, $84. They turned a 73-year-old man away over $84. Mom left 3 voicemails in 4 hours. I listened to them in order while sitting on the bathroom floor with the door locked. It was the only room in the house where I knew Chloe wouldn't hear the desperation. The first message was pure fire. "I don't know what game you're playing, Sarah, but your father can't see his specialist now. I hope you're satisfied with yourself." The second was strategic. "I talked to the pharmacy and they said the supplemental plan lapsed." "Lapsed, Sarah. Do you have any idea what that means? Your father's thinners are $412 out of pocket now. $412. The third was quiet, almost small. "Sarah, please just call me back." I sat on that cold tile and pressed my palms into my eyes until I saw stars. Every nerve ending in my body was screaming at me to call her, to fix it, to write the check and make the problem vanish the way I'd been doing for 10 years. The guilt was physical. It felt like a weight on my chest and a sour, metallic taste in the back of my throat. But then I thought about Chloe's college fund. $6,200 where $18,000 should have been. I thought about my daughter opening her tuition bills next year and realizing her entire future had been swallowed by her grandparents' prescriptions because I was too afraid to say no. I stayed on the floor. My phone buzzed one more time that evening. It wasn't Mom, it was Dad. He almost never called me directly. In our family, everything went through Mom, by permission or by proxy. But that night, his name popped up. When I answered, his voice sounded small and rough, like a man talking through a heavy window. "Sarah, I know this isn't fair to you." I waited. "Your mother won't listen to me," he whispered. "She never has, not about the money, not about how we treat you." He stopped. I could hear him breathing, the shallow, careful breaths of a man deciding whether to stay silent or say something that would change everything. He chose silence again, but this time, I could hear the apology hidden inside the quiet. "Good night, Dad," I said softly. "Good night, sweetheart." Chloe found out the truth that Sunday. She was sitting cross-legged on her bed with her laptop, working on an essay for a scholarship. The prompt asked her to write about a hardship that shaped her family. She wanted to check her 529 balance to include some specifics about financial planning in her narrative. I was in the kitchen boiling pasta when I heard her chair slide back. The sound of bare feet on the hardwood was fast. She appeared in the doorway holding her laptop like a lawyer presenting Exhibit A screen out. Evidence forward. "Mom, where's the money?" The portal was open. The balance read $1,340. She'd been clicking around because the transaction history was pulled up right below it. A long string of withdrawals over 3 years. The biggest one, $12,000, was dated the exact month of Dad's second knee surgery. I turned off the burner. I didn't try to spin it or redirect. She was old enough to know the score. "Grandpa needed surgery," I told her. "Insurance covered the hospital, but not the recovery or the specialized care. I used some of your fund to bridge the gap. I fully intended to put it back." "Some, Mom, it's almost gone." I told her the rest. Not the whole ledger, not the $216,000 total, but enough. I told her I'd been paying for Grandma and Grandpa's life, that it was more than I could handle, that I'd made choices I hated, and that I was so sorry. Chloe set the laptop on the counter. She didn't scream, she didn't even cry. She just stood there with her arms crossed, looking at me with an expression I'd seen in my own mirror. It was the look of a woman doing math she didn't like. "So Grandma's doctor visits were more important than my degree," she said. The sentence landed like a boulder in a pond. I felt the ripple hit my heart. "No," I said. "They weren't. And that's exactly why I stopped paying. She was quiet for a long time. The kitchen smelled like steam and starch. Then she said something that completely rearranged how I saw my daughter. She uncrossed her arms and whispered, "They took your money." And mine. It wasn't anger at me. It was anger asterisk for asterisk me. At 15, she understood what my mother never would, that giving until you're empty isn't generosity. It's just being empty. Dad showed up at my house the following Wednesday. He drove himself, which was a shock. Usually, Mom was the driver, or at least, she was the one who decided when the car left the driveway. He pulled up in his old Ford, the one with the dented tailgate, and knocked on the door holding a small paper bag like he was visiting a sick friend. Inside the bag was a tin of butterscotch candies, the exact same ones he used to buy me every Saturday when I was 8. The ones in the gold wrappers with the little cow on the front. I hadn't seen them in a decade. "Sit down, Dad," I said. He sat at my kitchen island, the envelope table, and gripped a glass of water. His knuckles were swollen, his hands shaking just a bit. 73 years old, 2 titanium knees, and a wife who had spoken for him so long he'd almost forgotten the sound of his own voice. "I knew," he said quietly. "About the payments, I've known since the 2nd year." I sat across from him and waited. "I saw the bank statement in the mail once. I didn't say anything to your mother because He stopped and rubbed the side of his nose, looking embarrassed. "I was afraid. I know how that sounds. A grown man scared of his wife. But your mom has a way of making you feel like the villain if you point out a problem. So I just let it go." "You let me carry it," I said. "Yes," he whispered, looking at the grain of the wood. "I let you carry all of it." Then he told me something I didn't see coming. 5 years ago, Aunt Vive had actually confronted Mom about the payments. She told Mom she was using me. Mom didn't yell. She just went quiet, that dangerous, icy quiet. Then she cut Vive off for 2 years. She told the whole family Vive was having a breakdown and needed space. Vive never corrected her because she knew nobody would believe her over the perfect Grandma Miller. "Your mother controls the narrative," Dad said. "She always has. I should have stood up for you a long time ago, Sarah." His eyes were wet. I had never seen my father cry. Not at funerals, not when he lost his job, not even when his own parents passed. "You deserved better from us," he said. "From me." He left the butterscotch on the counter. I didn't open them. I was saving them for a day that felt earned. The collections call came on a Friday. Not to me, to Jason. He called me at 8:00 a.m., which was a red flag. Jason is a circle back after lunch kind of guy. "Did you know?" he snapped, his voice thin and tight. "Did you know Mom put my phone number down as the emergency contact on her insurance paperwork?" I almost laughed. "No, Jason, I didn't. I just got a call from a collections agency. They're looking for the balance on a medical plan. They have my name, my cell, and my home address." "Welcome to my world," I said. The line went dead silent. I could hear something new in that silence. Not the sound of a man relaxing in a recliner, but the packing of someone who just realized they've stepped in something deep. "How long has this been going on?" he asked. "Really, 10 years, $1,800 a month." "I already told you this, Jason." "I know, but I don't know. I thought maybe you were exaggerating for effect." "Jason, I'm an auditor. I don't exaggerate numbers." He started asking the questions he should have asked in 2014. How much total? Why just me? Why didn't Mom tell him? I answered each one like I was presenting a quarterly report. Facts, dates, dollar amounts, no fluff. Then he asked the big one. Why didn't Mom just ask me to help? Because if she asked you, she'd have to admit there was a cost. I was easier. I didn't need to be asked. I just did it. I heard Becky's voice in the background asking, "Who is it?" Jason muffled the phone to answer her. When he came back, his tone had shifted. "She's been telling me you quit because you were having a tantrum. She made it sound like you were just being petty." "I know what she told you, but that's a lie. I'm broke, Jason. I literally cannot afford her." I heard him sit down in his chair, but this time it didn't sound comfortable. It sounded like a man who realized the chair he was sitting in was borrowed. He didn't offer to take over the payments yet, but for the first time in our lives, Jason was actually angry at the right person. Job hunting at 43 is a special kind of humility. You sit in waiting rooms with 20-somethings, clutching a resume and trying to explain why 14 years at one company is loyalty and not a warning sign. You smile at interviewers who weren't even born when you graduated. You answer, "Where do you see yourself in 5 years?" Without saying, "Not here, but I'll show up anyway." I sent out 41 applications in 3 weeks. I got 8 callbacks and 4 interviews. The rejections stung worse than the layoff because the layoff felt like bad luck, but the rejections felt like a verdict. My severance was bleeding out. I did the math every night. A new spreadsheet. A sadder one. Mortgage, lights, groceries, gas, Chloe's phone, the credit card I'd maxed out for Dad's last surgery. Without that $1,800 going to my parents, I could stretch the money 2 more months. If I were still paying them, I'd be underwater already. Chloe did something during those weeks that I still can't talk about without my voice cracking. She came home from school one afternoon with a grease stain on her sleeve and a name tag in her pocket. She gotten a job at the local ice cream shop. 16 hours a week at minimum wage. She hadn't asked me. She hadn't warned me. She just walked in, filled out the paperwork, and started her first shift. I found the copy of her application on the kitchen table. I think she left it there on purpose. I read it in my car in the driveway and cried for 10 minutes. When I finally walked inside, she was doing her homework at the island like nothing was different. Her hair smelled like vanilla soft serve and waffle cones. On the last day of March, I got the call. A small firm, 20 minutes south, needed a staff accountant. The salary was 15% less than my old gig. I took it before they even finished the sentence. I didn't call Mom. I called Aunt Vive. "I start Monday," I told her. "Good," she said. "Easter is in 2 weeks. You going to your mother's dinner?" "She hasn't invited me yet." "She will. She'll want an audience." There was a pause. "Are you ready, Sarah?" "I don't know." "Well," Vive said, "when you figure it out, make sure you bring the receipts." She meant it in every possible way. You know, when I saw Chloe's job application, a 15-year-old girl picking up shifts, scooping ice cream so her mom wouldn't have to worry, that was the moment the guilt finally died. My daughter stepped up when the people who raised me never did. If you've ever watched your child carry a burden that should have never been theirs to touch, you know exactly how that feels. Hit that subscribe button right now if you want to see what happened at that Easter table. It's the final part of this story, and I promise you, nobody at that dinner saw it coming. Now let me tell you about the invitation. It arrived on a Wednesday, 11 days before Easter. Mom called, and her voice had undergone a total transformation. I recognized the tone. It's the way a weatherman recognizes a pressure drop. A shift in the atmosphere that means a storm is building. "Sarah, honey." She hadn't called me honey since she needed me to co-sign a credit card 6 years ago. "I know things have been stressful lately, and I want you to know I understand." She didn't understand. Mom didn't understand things, she managed them, but I let her talk. "I'd love for you to come to Easter dinner. The whole family will be here. Jason, Becky, the boys. I even called your sister Brenda. She's flying in from Charlotte. Can you believe it? It's been 3 years. And Vivian said she'd come too. It'll be just like old times." Just like old times meant Mom at the head of a full table, conducting the conversation with invisible hands and very visible expectations. She was assembling an audience. I just didn't know what the performance was supposed to be yet. I called Vive 15 minutes later. "She's setting the stage," I said. "Of course she is," Vive replied. "Your mother doesn't cook a ham for 15 people unless she's planning a show. What are you going to do?" "I'm going, and I'm bringing that folder you know I've already put together." She knew me. I had, in fact, already started. It wasn't about revenge. I wasn't plotting some big cinematic takedown. I just wanted the truth to be visible for once. I wanted it to sit on the table like a dish everyone had to look at. That night, after Chloe went to bed, I sat at my table, the envelope table, and opened the filing cabinet in the hall. 10 years of bank statements, monthly transfers to the insurance carriers, confirmation emails I'd printed because I'm an accountant and that's what we do. I sorted them by year. I clipped them together. I slid them into a thick manila folder, 120 pages of proof. I weighed it in my hand. It was heavier than I expected. $216,000 has a physical weight when you print it out. It's about the weight of a thick paperback novel, the kind you'd read on a vacation if you ever had the money to take one. The printer finished its job at midnight. The house smelled like warm ink and heavy paper. I gathered the 120 pages, slid them into the manila folder, and tucked it into my laptop bag. 5 days before Easter, my dad called me at 7:00 in the morning. "Your mother, in the ER," he said. I was in my car, halfway to my new job, coffee in the holder, radio on low. I pulled into the first parking lot I saw, a hardware store that wasn't open yet, and sat there with the engine idling. "What happened?" "Blood pressure," he whispered. "She got dizzy coming out of the bathroom, grabbed the door frame, and just went down. I called the ambulance." I drove straight to the hospital. I didn't think about the $216,000, or the Saturday night envelopes, or the folder in my bag. I only thought about the fact that my mother was 71 and had been on the floor. No matter how many times she'd made me feel small or used, she was still my mother. And I was still the daughter who dropped everything when the phone rang. Mom was in a curtained bay, hooked to a monitor, wearing a hospital gown and an expression I couldn't quite pin down. It was somewhere between genuinely terrified and strategically wounded. She saw me walk in and said, without a hello or "I'm okay," 2 simple words, "See what happens." See what happens. As if her blood pressure spike were a consequence I had engineered. As if I'd reached into her chest from 40 minutes away and squeezed her arteries shut myself. I sat in the hallway on a plastic chair and stared at the floor tiles, speckled gray, the kind designed to hide stains. A nurse walked past smelling like industrial hand sanitizer. The monitor beeped in a rhythm that should have been comforting, but it felt like a countdown. For one terrible hour, I actually believed her. I sat in that hallway and thought, what if I'm killing my mother over a premium payment? What if the stress of losing the coverage is what did this? What if I really am the villain? Then the doctor came out. Mom had chronic hypertension diagnosed years ago, managed with medication. This episode wasn't caused by an insurance lapse. It was caused by Mom cutting her own dosage in half. She'd been splitting her pills to make them last longer, either to save money or, and this part made my stomach turn, to create exactly this kind of crisis. I'll never know if it was fear or strategy. Maybe in her mind, they were the same thing. A daughter who stops paying is a threat, and threats require countermeasures. I drove home that evening and checked my bag. The folder was still there. Easter was still on. Brenda arrived on Good Friday with one carry-on suitcase and the careful, guarded look of a woman visiting a country she used to live in but didn't recognize anymore. My younger sister was 40 now, living outside Charlotte, working in property management. She was busy, the kind of busy that's partly real and partly a shield. We hadn't seen each other in person in 3 years. Our relationship had thinned out to birthday texts and the occasional photo of her cat. She came to my house first, not Mom's, mine. We sat on the front porch in the cool April evening, each holding a glass of wine that was doing more heavy lifting than any wine should. The crickets were loud, those spring peepers that sound like tiny bells ringing in the dark. I told her all of it, start to finish. The amounts, the years, the spreadsheet, Chloe's empty fund, the layoff, the hospital visit, the folder. I talked for 30 minutes straight. Brenda listened the way people listen when they're recalculating their entire lives. When I finished, she set her glass on the porch railing and said, "Mom told me you wanted Asterisk to do it." She what? Years ago, I asked if you needed help with their bills. I knew things were tight. Mom said, "Sarah offered, she likes to feel needed. Don't worry about it, you have your own life to build." So I stopped worrying. I felt something shift behind my ribs, not anger, something older. "She told you I wanted to feel needed." Brenda nodded, then said even quieter, "She also told me you didn't want me to come home for the holidays." I turned to look at her, stunned. What? Last Christmas, I almost flew in. Mom said you told her I just caused drama, and it was better for everyone if I stayed in Charlotte. I have never said those words in my life. I have never thought them. Mom had built a wall between us using bricks she'd made from lies. Small lies, casual lies, the kind that sound true because they echo the shape of how someone might feel if you squint hard enough. I never said that, Brenda, not once. She pressed her lips together and looked out at the dark yard. She played us against each other. Yes. For how long? Long enough. Brenda picked up her wine. I'll be at that table tomorrow, and I won't be quiet. I didn't sleep the night before Easter. I sat at my kitchen island, always that same island, at 1:00 in the morning with the manila folder in front of me. 120 pages, each one a receipt for a choice I made and a debt no one had asked me to carry. The folder sat in the exact spot where the envelopes used to sit. I wondered what a therapist would say about that. Outside, a light rain started and stopped. I traced the edge of the folder and tried to rehearse what I'd say, but nothing sounded right. Everything in my head was either too angry or too rehearsed, and I didn't want either. I just wanted the truth to be in the room, undeniable, sitting on the table like a plate no one could push away. At 2:00 a.m., I heard the stairs creak. Chloe appeared in the doorway in her pajamas, hair tangled, squinting against the light. Mom, are you scared? I considered lying. I decided against it. Terrified. She padded over in her bare feet and sat in the chair next to me. She looked at the folder, then at me. Good, she said. That means it matters. 15 years old. She said it like it was an objective fact, that fear and importance are connected. That if you're not scared, you're probably not doing anything worth doing. I thought about my grandmother, Mom's mother, Ruth. She raised 4 kids on a secretary's salary after her husband walked out. Ruth never complained. Ruth never set a boundary. She carried the family on her back until her back literally gave out. Mom watched that and absorbed the lesson. This is what women do. They carry. Mom carried the family in her own way by delegating the weight to me, and I'd accepted it because I'd absorbed the same lesson from watching Mom watch Ruth. The pattern had traveled 3 generations. It stopped here, at this table, with a folder and a daughter who understood fear better than her grandmother ever had. I put the folder in my bag. I turned off the kitchen light. The last time I'd turn it off is the old version of myself. Mom's house was Easter ready, the way a theater is opening night ready. The table was set with the ivory china she kept in the hutch, the set she'd gotten as a wedding gift 51 years ago and handled with more tenderness than she handled most people. Cloth napkins, crystal glasses, a centerpiece of yellow tulips that must have cost $40. It was ironic given the crisis, but I stayed silent. The house smelled like cloves, brown sugar, and Mom's perfume, that floral department store scent she'd worn since the 80s. She greeted everyone at the door like a hostess at a fundraiser, warmth calibrated to the audience. Mrs. Miller from next door arrived first, complimenting everything. Donna, you look wonderful. How are you feeling after that scare? Mom waved it off with a brave little flutter of her hand. Oh, I'm fine. You know me. I don't let anything keep me down. Jason and Becky came next with the boys. Jason hugged Mom, but I noticed he didn't hold it long. Becky glanced at me with an expression somewhere between sympathy and reconnaissance. Brenda walked in and hugged me first. Mom's eyes tracked it like a security camera. Aunt Vive arrived last, carrying a covered dish and wearing the quiet, steady expression of a woman who had been waiting for this meal for a very long time. Dad sat at the head of the table, hands folded, saying nothing. On the counter behind him sat that tin of butterscotch candies he'd brought to my house. I hadn't noticed him retrieve it, but there it was, unopened, waiting. Everyone took their seats, 9 people around an oval table, candles lit, china gleaming. The scene was beautiful, fake, and held together by 50 years of practice. Mom stood up and tapped her glass with a fork. It was so rehearsed it might as well have been scripted. Before we eat, I just want to say how grateful I am for this family, she said. She turned to me with a smile meant for the audience, and especially for the children who never forget their parents. "Sarah, honey, would you like to say grace?" She handed me the stage. She just didn't know I was going to use it. I stood up. The chair scraped against the hardwood. 9 faces lit by candlelight, waiting for me to bow my head and murmur something about bread and blessings. I folded my hands. I kept my voice even. "Thank you for this food. Thank you for this table. Thank you for every person sitting here tonight, including the ones who came a long way to be here." I looked at Brenda. She gave me the smallest nod. "And I'm grateful for this table because this is where I want to be honest with all of you." Mom's smile didn't fall. It froze. Like a pond on the first hard night of winter, surface glassy, but something cracking underneath. Jason looked down at his plate. Becky looked at Jason. Mrs. Miller's fork, which she'd been holding like a starting pistol, lowered slowly. Vive leaned back. She'd been ready for a decade. Dad sat at the head of the table, and for the first time in my life, he looked directly at me. Not through me. At me. He nodded once. Chloe sat next to me. She put her hand on my arm under the table. Her fingers were cold. Mine were shaking. I pressed my arm against hers and drew a breath. Brenda straightened up. She was holding to her promise. The candles flickered. I reached under my chair and picked up my bag. The sound of the zipper was the loudest thing I'd said in 10 years. I pulled out the manila folder, thick, heavy, real, and set it on the table between the bread basket and the tulips. Mom looked at it. Her eyes went from the folder to my face and back. She recognized it before I said a word. She knew. "This is every bank statement from the last 10 years, I said. I didn't raise my voice. I didn't need to. Every transfer I made to the insurance carriers, every prescription copay I covered, every dental bill, every vision appointment, every out-of-pocket charge that fell through the gap. $216,000. Mrs. Miller inhaled sharply, her hand going to her throat. Becky's eyes widened as she looked at Jason, who had gone completely still, the kind of still that means you're hearing the ice crack under your feet. "That's what I paid over 10 years, I said. "Not because I was asked. Nobody asked. It just became my job. The way washing the dishes became my job. The way being the reliable one is a job nobody applies for but someone always gets." I turned to Jason. "You didn't know the amount. I told you on the phone and you thought I was exaggerating. I'm an auditor, Jason. Do you want to check the math?" Jason shook his head. He was staring at the folder like it was radioactive. I turned to Mom. "I called you the day I lost my job. 14 years at that company, gone in 20 minutes. I sat in my car and called you because I just wanted to hear you say you were sorry. You told me to get another job faster. You didn't ask if I was okay. You asked about Thursday's refills." Mom's chin lifted. Her fingers gripped the table. "Everything I did was for this family." "No, Mom." My voice was steady. "Everything I did was for this family. You just collected." The room was silent. Mrs. Miller's pie sat untouched. The ham was growing cold. I wasn't angry anymore. I was at that place you arrive at when the last debt has been counted and there's nothing left to calculate. "I'm not angry, Mom. I'm just done being invisible." Mom tried one last time. She reached for the narrative she knew best. "I raised you," she said, her voice doing that quaver she used to signal sacrifice. "I fed you. I stayed home so you could have a mother who was there." "And I'm grateful for that," I said. "But raising me was your choice, Mom. It wasn't a loan I had to repay with my daughter's future." Mrs. Miller was looking at Mom like a frame she'd been viewing her through for 40 years had suddenly shattered. The devoted mother she knew was still there, but the lighting had changed. Jason spoke up, his voice low. "Mom, did you know Sarah was paying all of this, the whole time?" Mom didn't answer. She looked at her plate. She adjusted her napkin. Then Dad's chair creaked. She knew. 2 words. After 51 years of marriage and 73 years of being the quiet man in the room, Bill Miller said 2 words that hit that house like a brick through a window. He didn't yell, but the words carried because they came from a man who had made a career of silence. Mom's head snapped toward him, the look of a general watching a private break formation. Then Brenda leaned forward. "Mom, you told me Sarah didn't want me here. You said she thought I was drama." "She never said that." "And you told the family Aunt Vive had a falling out with you," I added. "She didn't. She told you to stop using me, and you punished her for it for 2 years." Mom's eyes went from me, to Brenda, to Dad, to Vive. For the first time in my life, my mother was speechless. The woman who controlled every story was sitting in a room where every story had been exposed. A tear slid down her cheek and landed on the white cloth napkin. It spread slowly, a dark circle on the fabric. And for the first time, nobody at that table moved to comfort her. Her tears didn't have power anymore. I let the silence do its work. Then I spoke one last time, and my voice was softer, because what I had to say wasn't an accusation. It was a line in the sand. "I'm not cutting you off," I said, my voice cutting through the heavy silence of the dining room. "I'm not punishing you. I love you both, but I will not be the silent checkbook anymore." I laid it out exactly the way I'd lay out a budget for a client, clear, practical, and without a hint of apology. I proposed a new system. The 3 of us, me, Jason, and Brenda, would split the cost of Mom and Dad's supplemental coverage evenly or weighted by income. Whatever worked, as long as it was transparent. Every bill would be visible to everyone. No more one person carrying the mountain while the others looked the other way. Jason nodded before I even finished. His jaw was tight, and for the first time he didn't look at Mom when he spoke. "I should have been paying all along," he said quietly. "I'm sorry, Sarah." Becky put her hand on his arm. She didn't say a word, but the look she shot me across the table said everything. I'm going to make sure he follows through. Brenda spoke next. "I'll set up a recurring transfer tomorrow. It should have been happening for years. I'm sorry I let Mom convince me it wasn't necessary." Dad watched the entire exchange from the head of the table. He had an expression I'd never seen before, a kind of stunned, profound relief. He looked like a man who had been holding his breath underwater for a decade and had finally broken the surface to find air. I turned back to Mom. She hadn't spoken since Dad's 2 words. Her cheeks were wet, her hands were folded tightly in her lap, and her posture was smaller than I'd ever seen it. She looked old, suddenly. Not the kind of old that commands respect, but the kind that comes when the pedestal you've built for yourself finally crumbles. "I love you, Mom," I said, "but I won't love you at the cost of my daughter's future." Mom finally looked up, her eyes red. "I didn't know about Chloe's college fund," I added, "because you never once asked how I was making the math work." The words hung in the air. They weren't cruel, they were just true. And in that room, everyone felt the difference. Dad reached behind him to the kitchen counter and picked up the tin of butterscotch candies. He set it in front of me and pried off the lid. The smell of buttered caramel rose up, warm, golden, the exact scent of Saturday mornings when I was 8, when the world was small and my father bought me candy and nothing hurt yet. Nobody spoke. I took a butterscotch. Dad took one too. It was the quietest, sweetest apology I've ever accepted. The morning after Easter, my phone didn't ring. I lay in bed, staring at the ceiling, listening to the silence. For 10 years, most mornings started with a call from Mom, a question about a payment, a reminder about a prescription, a small request that was never really a request. The phone was always first, before coffee, before thinking, before I remembered who I was outside of being useful. That morning, there was just the sound of birds and the gurgle of the coffee maker Chloe had set on a timer. The sun threw thin gold lines across my bedspread. I lay there for 15 minutes and didn't reach for a single thing. The day unfolded with a new kind of rhythm. By noon, Jason had transferred $600 to the insurance account. Becky texted me. "It's set up as a recurring payment. I'll make sure it stays that way." Brenda sent a screenshot of her $400 transfer. I added $500, not $1,800, just $500. The difference between those 2 numbers was the sound of my own life starting to breathe again. That afternoon, I reopened Chloe's 529 portal. Balance, $1,340. I set up an automatic monthly deposit. It was small for now, but it was consistent. The kind of math that compounds. Dad called around dinner time. He kept it short. He was never a man of many words, and one revolution at a dinner table wasn't going to change his DNA. "Thank you, Sarah, for last night." "Thank you for what you said, Dad." I could hear Mom in the background. She wasn't speaking, but she was there, a presence in the room, the way she always was. She didn't take the phone, but she didn't hang up the extension either. It wasn't closure in the way movies portray it, no swelling music or tearful group hugs. It was just the awkward, unfinished beginning of something that might eventually be okay. Mom hasn't apologized. She might never. Some people's love language is the asterisk absence of cruelty rather than the asterisk presence of kindness. I've had 43 years to learn that dialect, but the pattern was broken. The envelope was lighter. The table was shared. For the first time in a decade, the morning belonged to me. 3 months later, on a Tuesday in July, I sat in a dentist's chair for the first time in 4 years. It wasn't dramatic. It was just a cleaning. But I'd been canceling mine since Dad's second surgery, when every spare dollar went elsewhere. As the hygienist leaned me back and adjusted the light, I felt a strange wave of relief. The specific relief of being tended to. Of being in a chair where someone else was responsible for the next 45 minutes, and all I had to do was sit still. The new job has settled in. The office is smaller and the coffee is terrible, but the paycheck is steady, and $1,300 more stays in my account every single month. I've built a small emergency fund. I've paid off half the credit card, and Chloe's 529 balance is climbing, slowly, in the quiet increments that don't show up until you stop checking every day. Chloe ended up getting a partial scholarship. The essay she wrote about growing up in a family where one person carries the world and what it costs to be the reliable one, won a regional award. I read it in my car in the parking lot of the ice cream shop where she still works Saturday shifts. I cried the way I used to cry over spreadsheets, except this time, the numbers were finally moving in the right direction. Mom and I talk every Sunday now. Short calls, 10 minutes max. She asks about Chloe. She talks about the weather. She never mentions the past. But last week, she mailed Chloe a check for $200 with a note that said, "For your books." The handwriting was shaky, but it was the first thing she'd ever given without being prompted. Every Thursday night, I still sit at my kitchen table. Same table, same clock, though the battery is fresh. I write a check for $500. I seal the envelope. The glue still tastes like chalk, but next to it, I lay the printouts of Jason's and Brenda's transfers. The total isn't quite $1,800 anymore. Brenda researched a Medicare adjustment that Dad signed up for in July, bringing the costs down. It isn't a perfect system, but families rarely are. I look at the clock. It's 9:15 p.m., not midnight, not the silent, lonely hours I used to spend drowning in guilt. I have the rest of the evening to myself. I can read. I can sit on the porch. I can think about absolutely nothing at all. I used to think loving someone meant giving them everything until you were empty. Turns out, real love is knowing what you can't afford to lose. I didn't burn any bridges. I just stopped building them alone. Setting that weight down didn't make me selfish. It made me smart enough to survive. If you're the one carrying the world on your shoulders right now, remember, you don't have to wait for a thank you to decide you're finished. Sometimes the only person who can give you your life back is you.